الرحمن الرحيم إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا صدق الله العظيم. Today we are marking the 6th anniversary or 6 years since the shameless and ruthless attack on a school by the terrorists. When we imagine about the tragedy that befell the families on that day, let us for a moment put ourselves in their shoes. Let us put ourselves in the shoes of the students who were being chased around in the hallways by trained and armed militants, by trained and armed terrorists, and they were gunned down by the numbers. Let us put ourselves in the shoes of those parents who lost their children on that day. They sent them to school, prepared them in the morning, and some of them did not see their faces again in the afternoons. Just saying that runs shudders down my spine. Such is the tragedy and the misery and the suffering that befell upon those families on that fateful day. The little that we as professionals of the field can do is number one, to remember the martyrdom and the sacrifice of those children. Number two, to give certain policy recommendations to the decision makers that would help them make policy decisions to avert any such eventuality in future. That attack led to an unprecedented national consensus among all the political parties, which culminated in the signing of the National Action Plan, a policy document which ended the 6-year moratorium on the death penalty of the hanging of the terrorists. Not only were those 6 terrorists killed by our valiant security forces on that day, but 4 of their facilitators were also arrested about a year later, and then they were hanged. It took the government another 4 years to constitute a judicial commission in October 2018 through a suo motu notice of the Supreme Court. And that judicial commission, after around 2 years of deliberation in July 2020, made its report public, which inter alia also called for stronger border management and also pointed out some of the lapses, security lapses on that day that eventually resulted in such a massive loss of innocent lives. Therefore, I think it is essential to answer some of the questions that are raised through this webinar, such as, what have we learned so far and what needs to be done to counter terrorism at home? Did the ending of the moratorium on death penalty really serve the purpose? Is NAP still relevant and helpful, or do we need to make changes to it? What concrete steps need to be taken to counter Indian subversive activities and propaganda against Pakistan, both at national and international level? With this, I have the proud privilege of introducing our speakers, our panelists for today's session. We have, I think, Rahimullah Saab has joined us. I guess he has joined us now. He has. I think Rahimullah Saab is not in yet, so I think the first I would invite Ms. Shumaila Zahoor to make the first contribution. Ms. Shumaila Zahoor is serving as a lecturer in the Department of International Relations at the National Defense University, Islamabad. Previously, she has served in Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad for 3 years as visiting faculty in various departments. She completed her MPhil in IR from Quaid-e-Azam University in 2017. Her research interests include identity politics, Middle East, non-state actors, theoretical paradigms of IR, and political Islam. She is pursuing her PhD in IR from Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. Alongside her, we also have Lieutenant Colonel retired Syed Qasim Shah, who I'll introduce to the participants later, and Major Yasser Chanjua as a discussant as well, who I'll also introduce to the participants later. And we are also hoping that Rahimullah Yusufzai Saab will also be able to join us. With that, I hand over the mic to Ms. Shumaila Zahoor. Over to you, Ms. Shumaila Zahoor.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to you all. Since it's a very sensitive issue to discuss and to talk upon, so it was an incident that we can't forget and a tragedy that we can't forgive. Peshawar APS attack, and whenever this memory comes to my mind, it raises a question that is closure even possible for the survivors of the APS massacre and the families of those who lost loved ones on that terrible day? 147 people, including 132 students, they were being martyred when militants attacked the Army Public School in Peshawar on December 16, 2014. It was the time when for hours, parents, they were distraught because they were not knowing whether their kids they were alive or dead, but they were gathered at the entrance as security personnel fought pitched battles through the day with heavily armed assailants inside the premises. And at the end of it, several areas of school presented scenes of carnage, particularly that auditorium. And it was the day when the nightmare unfolded. Teachers and students of the Army Public School, Peshawar, had just returned to their classes after recess. Some students, including 18-year-old Yasser Iqbal, gathered in the large auditorium and were attentively listening to the lecture. Others sat their desks, eye on the clock instead of the blackboard, silently urging for the hands to move faster for the day to end so they could go home. In grade 1, it was a 6-year-old Khola. It was her first day of school, and she was overjoyed that she had finally joined her sibling instead of staying home. It would be her only day at school. Let me tell you another tragic story of the student. Kholas would become out of one of those 144 names, a long list that had been prepared by murderers that day at the school. And the incomprehensibly high body count combined with the vulnerability of the victims make it the most horrific attack in Pakistan's history. And while this number, 144, is a story unto itself, the 144 stories within it have to be told. 8th grader Uzair Ali, let me quote him. He saw the attackers and leaped to shield his friends by laying on the top of them. He was killed, shot 13 times, but he managed to save his companions. 14 years old Fahad Hussain opened a door so his friends could run out. And he stayed by door, making sure everyone was evacuated. He was gunned down while doing so. And this was a tragic day. On this day, let me tell you the background. Let me tell you the scenario that was being created there. There were the guards at the gate, 2 mobile vigilance teams in the vicinity, the quick response force stationed 10 minutes away, and the police rapid response force for deployment in the cantonment area. One MVT was lured further afield by a simple decoy tactic. The attackers set alight the vehicle in which they had arrived that enabled them to sneak into the school premises from the back wall. A critical advantage because they took up their positions inside before anyone was aware an attack was underway. And unfortunately, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, it was behind that incident. They claimed this responsibility of this attack, and they stated that it was their revenge against Operation Zarb-e-Azab and Pakistan Army. Let me quote, "This was a tragedy so monumental that it will remain forever seared in the national consciousness." But the story did not end here, dear audience. This attack sparked a huge reaction or a series of reactions in Pakistan. Not only politicians, but public, religious parties, journalists, government, everyone condemned this attack. The whole nation came close and stood together to express solidarity with the martyrs and survivors of APS Peshawar attack. Many countries and international organizations condemned the attack and expressed their condolences. National and international media coverage of the incident took place. There were certain measures to counter this threat on behalf of state. After this attack, a national action plan was developed, and a significant proposal in the NAP relates to revamping of the criminal justice system. Media played its constructive role, and its coverage of Peshawar APS attack for the first time did not increase fear and insecurity and anxiety, but in fact, it directed Pakistani nation towards public solidarity and peace. Now, in this context, how can we negate the civil society's response, constructive response towards this attack? That showed and that proved that Pakistani nation is not a reactionary nation. It has the ability to respond constructively towards an incident, towards a casualty. So Taliban's at that time, they did not come to kill ferociously the children and the teachers there in APS school, but they wanted to destroy the very idea of an education. And that's why this was described as the blackest day in Pakistan's history and a national tragedy that we can't forgive and that we can't forget. And instead of, as we mentioned earlier, that instead of reacting, people responded optimistically to the brutal acts of terrorists. Asma's brother survived the attack, and she said that Pakistan's school children will not be intimidated in abandoning their education. She further said when her brother came home, he was more courageous and determined, and this attack did not lessen his will and morale. Muhammad Wali Khan, a survivor, but he was brutally attacked by the terrorists. They shot 6 guns on his face, 1 on his leg, and 1 on his hand. He said that the terrorists aimed at stopping them from being educated, but they failed to do so. He told that after that incident, he decided to join Army or Air Force to take revenge of his friends, but then he rejected the idea and he decided that he'll get education and will defeat them. He said before this incident, he was a normal child, but now he is the bravest one. He further told, whenever he sees scars on his face, he takes them as his medals. They make him feel proud that he fought with the terrorists without giving up. One of the victims' father told media personnel that they were afraid of their children, that they might not continue their education, but their children rejoined the same institute with more enthusiasm and courage. He condemned this attack and concluded that rejoining of school by our children is the real defeat of terrorism and terrorists. In this particular situation, when there are tragedies, when there are casualties, when there are losses of life, and when we consider the civilian response to such tragic events, how can we negate the role of mothers? How can we negate the constructive and courageous role that they play? Napoleon once said, "Give me good mothers, and I'll give you a great nation." So Andalib Aftab, one of the bravest mothers, an APS teacher and the mother of one of the martyrs, unfolded the whole story in front of media and stated that though she lost her son, her colleagues, but this attack failed to terrorize them. She said that it brought more power to her and she rejoined the school the very first day of its reopening on 12th of January 2015. Another Shaheed Asfan, his father, while talking to media, said that this incident must be considered as a role model for us all. The children sacrificed their lives the way our forefathers at the time of independence, he said. And we must refresh this incident to tell the terrorists that Pakistan has its future in safe hands. Dear audience, such responses by them proved that they stood firmly against terrorism. Parents sent their children to schools, and by doing this, they refused to be influenced by terror. And the most important aspect of this incident was that it was humanized by media coverage and people's response. The children were not taken as the victims of the attack, but as martyrs and survivors, and everything um, about this event was made public. It was the incident when people responded to it regardless of their religious and ethnic grudges. Though vulnerability and fear, they were there. And the questions were being raised that how the plan was being made and then how it was being executed successfully. But out of this fear and vulnerability, we learned a lesson that terrorism has no religion, terrorism has no nationality, and it's a contempt to human dignity. Dear audience, I'll conclude my talk by incorporating the words of Rukmini Maria Kalimachi on APS tragedy. She titled it as To You Who Killed, by addressing to the terrorists who perpetrated the attack on children at Army Public School, Peshawar, Pakistan, on 16th of December 2014, that killed more than 130 young students. So she starts with the line, You who methodically shot innocent children, even as they trembled in terror and begged for escape, you who thought nothing of revenge, even if it meant unimaginable brutality, you who want the world to cover the fear, even as the world cannot understand your act, what hurt you so that you had to kill? What made you feel so unheard that you had to make us listen through the heart-rending wails of grieving mothers? What made you feel so rejected that you had to find a voice through the silent pains of benumbed fathers? Why do you feel so unseen that you had to prove your presence by replacing parents' dreams with nightmares? I do not have it in me to blame you. Perhaps I created you too. By ignoring those beyond my little world, I cannot bring myself to condemn you. Perhaps I killed dreams too by refusing to engage with the peripheries of my life. I do not want to punish you. Perhaps I marginalized you. By labeling you an undesirable, I stand in grief, I mourn in pain. But I know not if the grief and pain are for the lives lost through those little ones, or for the lives in you that still stand ostracized. Did some mother not nurture you in her womb and dress you with care as she sent you to play? Did some father not work a little harder to earn that extra penny for your future? In killing those children, you bereaved your parents. They lost you to your choices. How do we find you back and integrate you in us? How do we stop rejecting you? And that terror is not your only option. Talk to me, abandoned child. The lost lives tell me I cannot heal death with more death. Are you willing to give life a chance? I thank you all.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sahoor, for talking about the human element of this tragedy. Sometimes, in such tragedies, when we talk about the numbers and statistics, we lose this human angle to such tragedies. Thank you for bringing it forward and discussing it, and also highlighting the positive role that was played by the media and the positivity that was shown at the time by the society and the state to counter the threat. But as we are speaking today, we also want to talk about not only the positives, but also the negatives. We also want to learn from the mistakes that were identified in the Judicial Commission's report. And, uh, and do we really feel safe that our children in the schools are safer today than they were in 2014? So I hope that the next few speakers would shed light on that as well. Rahimullah Saab, since he's back online, he was supposed to speak first, but since he had lost connection, most of us know him very well, but there is no harm in recapping his profile a little. Mr. Rahimullah Yousafzai was among the first journalists to report on the Taliban and visited Kandahar in 1995. He is one of the few bona fide experts on Afghanistan, having reported on the country since 1979 invasion of Afghanistan by the former Soviet Union. He is the current editor of the Jung Group's The News International at the Peshawar Bureau and is an op-ed writer for the monthly Newsline alongside various other national dailies. Rahimullah Yousafzai is especially noted for holding the last interview with Osama bin Laden. He also served as Times Pakistan correspondent. Mr. Yousafzai is also a correspondent of BBC Pashto and Urdu services in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan. With that introduction, it's over to you, Rahimullah Saab.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I have to, as you said, try to talk about the lessons learned. So my topic actually is lessons learned. I will recap as to what happened at the time. I have taken a few notes and then, I'll talk about that. So, a minute. Oh, yes. I hope you can see me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let me start by saying that, look at the timing of the attack. December 16, 1971 was when East Pakistan was lost, and the masterminds had chosen December 16 to launch this attack. It could not have been done without input from an anti-Pakistan power, and we believe that it was India and Afghanistan's intelligence agency, NDS. So NDS and RAW joining hands and sponsoring the attackers. This is what we knew at that time also to some extent, but now we know it more, especially after this press conference by Foreign Minister and DG ISPR, in which they provided a lot of evidence, the dossier, which was given to the media and then has also been handed over to the UN and a number of countries. Also for the record, we need to have correct figures because I see different figures being given about the martyrs and the people who were injured. So the figure which we got officially is 147 martyred, including 132 school children. The rest were teachers and other employees. 125 were injured. Among those martyred were 3 soldiers and 11 were wounded. Maybe I should also mention a name. Among the martyrs was Naik Altaf, who came from another army regiment based nearby and jumped a few walls to reach the school to try and rescue students. This was a story of valor, like so many others, but there were also cowards, including an army officer and 2 others who escaped and were subsequently punished by the army after inquiry. Other heroes were the principal, Tahira Qazi, who left the auditorium where most of the killings took place to inform the authorities about the attack and then returned to the auditorium to face almost certain death. And then we had a teacher, Saima Tariq, whose husband was a brigadier in the army. She was burned alive by the militants while trying to save students. The military operation after the attack took almost 8 hours. And it is said it was too long. But the 6 terrorists who were well entrenched, suicide bombers, they were there, and the soldiers were trying to save the students. APS is a school and also a college, but the primary school and the college was spared. Only the high school was attacked. The army says its quick reaction force reached there in 8 minutes. Some people, eyewitnesses, say 15 minutes. We don't have any precise figure, but the soldiers definitely had a difficult task, as they had to ensure that the children are not harmed and terrorists don't enter the junior section of the school. We all know that 6 months before the APS attack, the military operation Zarb-e-Azab, the biggest of the dozen, almost a dozen military operations since 2003, was launched in North Waziristan after the failure of peace talks with the TTP by the Nawaz Sharif government. The militants had suffered huge losses. They had lost territory and escaped to Afghanistan. So retaliation was to be expected after Zarb-e-Azab. Threat alerts of attacks on military institutions, including army-run schools, were issued, but proper security measures were not taken. The APS attack was a major security lapse. The National Action Plan was formulated in January, a month after the APS attack, but I will say it was 11 years late in the making, because the military operation in Pakistan against local and foreign militants had started in the autumn of 2003. So we came up with a plan after 11 long years. Though operations were taking place during this period, but the response against militancy and terrorism wasn't all encompassing. To tackle the issue head on and not only through security action. We all know the nation came together as in the wars with India, and we will recall that when military action was taken in Swat and Malakand in May 2009, it caused huge displacement. And I remember 85% of the displaced people were accommodated by host communities in Mardan, Charsadda, Nashera, Peshawar, Sawabi, and only 15% were living in relief camps. So people responded, to help their fellow citizens. After the APS tragedy, we saw that the civil and military leadership came together. The nation responded collectively, and the PTI's 126 days dharna was called off. Even otherwise, it wasn't going to achieve its objective anytime soon to remove the Nawaz Sharif government. We have another, situation like that now. Maybe another dharna, a long march, and let's see what happens this time. The APS attack was also a factor in the eventual merger of FATA with Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and the initiation of major political, administrative, judicial, and policing reforms after 70 long years of neglect. The fencing of the border with Afghanistan was undertaken. This is also because of the APS and other terrorist incidents. So for the first time, Afghans and even Pakistanis crossing the border required a visa. We, by fencing the border, are putting facts on the ground on the Durand Line border, which is still not recognized by Afghanistan as the international border, although we believe it is an international border with proper customs, immigration, and security. The APS attack provided evidence that Afghanistan-based Pakistani militants and others were a constant threat to Pakistan. Even now, we have the UN figures recently released that 6,500 Pakistani militants are based in Afghanistan and planning attacks to destabilize Pakistan. We all remember that the Army Chief, General Rahir Sharif, and the ISI head, Lieutenant General Rizwan Akhtar, flew to Kabul the very next day on December 17, 2014, to share evidence of Afghanistan-based terrorists in the APS attacks, as Pakistan had intercepted the conversation between the attackers in Peshawar and the mastermind who called himself Khalifa Omar Mansour through a listening device. So we had the proper evidence. It was presented to the Afghan government, but they didn't respond positively. Even otherwise, the mastermind himself had provided evidence. He had put pictures seeing of the attackers when they traveled to Pakistan for the attack on the Taliban website. So this was evidence given by the attackers themselves. The military now says 95% terrorist attacks originate from Afghanistan. And so did the APS, because all the 6 attackers were trained and they came from Pakistan. Strangely enough, they crossed 20 security checkpoints on the way to Peshawar. Then they entered Pakistan through Khyber, and then all the way to Peshawar, and then the APS. So they were failure again, as I said, security failure. Another fallout was, which came a bit later in January 2018, was the Paigam-e-Pakistan fatwa by 1828 ulama from all sects against suicide bombing, which were declared haram, and fighting against the state was outlawed. Using Pakistani soil to launch attacks in other countries was also, condemned. This was the first time that such a fatwa was issued because the state was under assault. All those involved in the attack on APS are no more. The 6 attackers all were killed. The mastermind, Khalifa Omar Mansour, whose real name was Aurangzeb. He was also called Nare. Nare is a Pashto word because he was rather slim. He belonged to a village in rural Peshawar, and then Maulana Fazlullah. These were the people who are no longer alive. They have met their fate. And by the way, Khalifa Omar Mansour and Fazlullah were killed in Afghanistan, in Nangarhar and Connaught province in US drone attacks. Afghan government has always been in a state of denial, but that could no longer happen after these people were killed in Afghanistan. I mean, all the masterminds. And Ashraf Ghani then finally conceded that these people were in Afghanistan when he came to attend a conference in Islamabad. The martyrs have been remembered in many ways, and the families have been compensated. Nobody has been compensated so much in Pakistan after any terrorist attacks. I'm just trying to refresh your memory because many people are still complaining. For example, the previous speaker, Shumala, I think she mentioned that these are all martyrs They gave the supreme sacrifice. But let me tell you, many families and their supporters say they did not choose to become martyrs. They actually happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. This is what we hear from them. Their reaction in many cases has been very strong, very harsh. That's why they were not satisfied with the inquiries. They wanted judicial inquiry, and finally a judicial commission was set up, which gave its report about 2 months ago, I think. So let me tell you, how were they compensated? Each martyr's family was paid rupees 2 million by the provincial government. They were given plots of land. 865 were sent to Saudi Arabia to perform Umrah by the army for a spiritual journey, and also because, to try to calm them down. These were the family members of those who were martyred and injured. 144 of the family members and survivors were sent on educational and sightseeing trips to China, Turkey, Oman, US, and Tajikistan. Civil awards were given to all of them. And then 103 schools and 3 roads were named after the martyred students in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, 10 in Punjab, 1 in Balochistan. And these were mostly students belonging to these provinces. So schools in their own provinces were named after them, also roads. Punjab sent 1370 laptops for all students, teachers, and other employees. Free education and admission was arranged for those who fulfilled the merit in cadet and professional colleges. And they were actually also given tuition to prepare them for the merit exam. Army offered 21 jobs to those who needed them. Unfortunately, there was a splintering of the forums which were formed by the parents to highlight the issue and to seek justice. So we had the Shohada Forum, we had the Ghazi Forum, and we had another third independent forum. And sometimes it was very sad to witness these parents, divided instead of being united to seek whatever they wanted. Although we saw improvement in security for the educational institutions, but even then, the Bacha Khan University in Charsadda was attacked after the APS tragedy. And the militants started attacking other places, other unguarded places and institutions. As we all know, no place and no city was spared. The militants were always one step ahead of the government. They had a strong propaganda and media campaign. Their spokesman would reveal the attack first, and the much bigger and resourceful ISPR would respond later. Timing is very important if you want to get your story in the media. The military did its own inquiry. A judicial commission was formed by the Supreme Court by taking notice of the parents' request. The Supreme Court ordered this report of the Judicial Commission to be made public, which was rare in Pakistan because we all know previous Judicial Commission reports were not made public, like the Hamudur Rahman Commission after the East Pakistan tragedy. And surprisingly and unfortunately, this Hamudur Rahman Commission was first disclosed by the Indian media. The Supreme Court asked the government to take action not only against the low-ranked officials, but also senior officers, which was again very rare in Pakistan. Now, 6 facilitators who helped the 6 attackers, they were arrested and punished in Pakistan. 5 were given death penalty. Among them, 1 was a pesh imam, 1 was a clerk, 1 was a rickshaw driver, who dropped them near the army public school. Those beyond Pakistani borders were mostly killed by US drone strikes. As Pakistan put pressure on the Americans that you have carried out 430 drone strikes in Pakistan and not many in Pakistan and Afghanistan against the Pakistani militants. So the pressure worked, and then the Americans also launched attacks in Afghanistan against Pakistani militants and also the Daesh members who were mostly Pakistanis. Now, we need, I was talking about the lessons learned. For example, on the first day of the attack, 16 December, since I am based in Peshawar, we were not allowed, I mean the media, to go to the school. We put pressure, we demanded, and then finally on the second day we were allowed access. We went into the school, especially the auditorium, and we saw with our own eyes the destruction, the killings, blood splattered on the floor, on the walls, broken chairs and furniture, school bags, ripped apart, and school books which were torn into pieces. So we saw all that. And I must tell you, this access provided by the military really worked in Pakistan's favor. We saw the images, and that had an impact not only in Pakistan, but also all over the world. So the lesson is you have to trust your media, you have to take them into confidence, and they will always be by your side. They will take care of national interest. They will mobilize the people. I think not granting access to the media can be counterproductive. Also, we need focus of attention in a country with numerous problems and issues. This is a lesson learned. I told you that FATA was merged. After that, it had to happen one day, but it happened after 70 years in May 2018. And this was the most logical solution. We could not have a place where there were no proper Pakistani laws. We know we need uniform laws in the whole country. So now the problem is that we need resources to implement the reforms which have been announced for FATA and to overcome the underdevelopment. These resources are lacking. The federal government and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa have paid up their 3% of the share in the National Finance Commission Award. Punjab promised, but no payment has been made yet. And sadly enough, Sindh and Balochistan have refused to give their share of 3% to FATA. Everybody agrees FATA is strategically very important because of the neglect and underdevelopment. The terrorists were able to find refuge and capture territory. And this was a cause of terrorism, not only in FATA, but also in rest of Pakistan. So we have to develop and stabilize ex-FATA, now called the newly merged district. We have to give its people rights, apart from judicial, political, policing, and administrative reforms. We need resources. And as we know that rupees 100 billion a year were promised, these were extra funds apart from the rupees 24 billion a year annual development program for these former tribal areas. So it comes to about 1,000 billion for 10-year development strategy, which has been finalized. Now the issue is, can the state maintain focus on these newly merged districts and keep providing the resources which are required and overcome the insecurity and capacity issues? We could not spend 24 billion a year because of insecurity and capacity issues. How come we can spend 124 billion now with these 100 billion extra funds? That is the big question mark, and we still haven't found answer to this question. So if we again neglect FATA, I mean the ex-FATA, you can imagine what can happen in future, because Afghanistan is still very hostile and this area is very underdeveloped. the education, in socio-economic indicators are lowest in the whole country. So we have to bring it at par with the rest of the country to avoid these kind of problems in future. Now, the last point is that we also need peace in Afghanistan because, all these areas in Pakistan which face conflict, I mean, ex-Fata, parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa like Swat and rest of Malakand division. There are 8 districts in Malakand division and all of them suffered, and then parts of Balochistan. So we need peace in Afghanistan because it's a neighbor. Pakistan's role is that of a facilitator and peacemaker. A stable Afghanistan will also help Pakistan. Pakistan suffered the most due to the 42-year-old Afghan conflict. After Afghanistan, we have suffered the most. And after Afghanistan, we will also benefit the most if there is peace in Afghanistan. And that's why we are going out of the way to facilitate the peace process. We helped in the Taliban US talks. And finally, we had a peace agreement in February this year. And now we are trying to facilitate the intra-Afghan dialogue. It's going to be difficult. The Afghan government is still suspicious. So we have a big challenge, but we had to do it maybe in memory of the martyrs of APS. They offered sacrifices, and I think these sacrifices should not go in vain. And then we need to maintain the focus of attention. Otherwise, there could be problems again. I think I will end here and maybe take questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rahimullah Saab, for not only highlighting the security lapses that took place on that day, but also all the lessons that the policymakers of Pakistan learned. And the tragedy was followed by concrete steps, such as the fencing of the border with Afghanistan and the mainstreaming of FATA. I have some of my thoughts with regard to the mainstreaming of FATA and relations with Afghanistan. I have some questions in my mind as well, which I'll leave for the Q&A session. Now, I will move on to our next speaker for today, Lieutenant Colonel retired Syed Qasim Shah. Lieutenant Colonel retired Syed Qasim Shah is a former army officer with a long and distinguished career in the Pakistan Army. He is an eyewitness of the incident of APS. We all know him as Captain Gulsher of Alpha Bravo Charlie, the TV show as well. Colonel Shah, that's all the introduction I have for you. So I now would request you to give your remarks.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak on such a high esteemed forum. Much has been said. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. I was an eyewitness of the whole situation right from the morning. It was around 10:15 once I received a message, because my office was nearby, like at a distance of maybe 2 kilometers. We received this message. Then once operation started by that time. Okay, much has been said about the incident, what all has happened. Everybody knows about it, what all the government has been doing, everything. But I'll take this opportunity in expressing my views about and what all happened in Peshawar.
Sir,
the people of Peshawar,
we had lost your sound for a bit, but it's back now.
It's back now. Oh, okay. What the people of Peshawar have been doing, right from that day onwards, I maintained contact with the people who lost their loved ones in this whole like on this 16th of December. There's a psyche why this day was chosen. Let me tell you something about that. I was posted in Bosnia. We went for that ISPR project to Bosnia. And there I was told in Sarajevo, it was an enclave. We all know about it. Whenever there used to be any event on the situation of that enclave was like this on the top of the mountains. There that was captured by the the Serbian bunkers were there on the top of the mountain. In the valley there was Bosnians and Bosnian Muslims, most of them. They were encircled by them, and on the peaks were captured by the Serbs, and they were manning all those posts, all those bunkers facing inwards. What used to happen that whenever there used to be any birthday on any of the post, any of the bunker, there was a girl who was famous for her shooting. She was a known sniper. Uh, she was a corporal in the Serbian army. That was her specialty, that she would never miss any fire. She used to be called to any of the posts where there used to be any birthday or any anniversary or any event on that particular bunker where the Serbian soldiers were there. She would go there, make an aim, and on the central square of the city, center square of the Sarajevo, she would try to find out, is there any kid available, any boy, any girl, any kid, any toddler, and she would aim and kill right from the mountain. Just and after they have done their shot, what used to happen that aerial firing and voices of exuberance used to be heard all over the valley, and that was an indication that was some celebration at the peak, some celebration at the post. The boy was killed, like to celebrate. The same happened on 16th of December as well. They celebrate on 16th of December, and on their celebration, they would love their enemy, because we are known as their enemies. That enemy should have a bloodbath on that day. So that was the psyche behind it. The same happened on the Kashmir annexation day. The same happened on that day as well, when they targeted a madrasa in Peshawar. And so this is the psyche and this is the brutality. The same happened in onto the face of the earth, that is known as the Europe. In Bosnia, nobody reported, and everybody was witness, but nothing could be done because the sufferers were us, the sufferers were the Muslims. And here the same thing happened. The sufferers are Pakistani kids, boys and girls, and teachers, innocents. So the response of the world is quite evident. Thank God that we managed to generate this response across the globe, what we are seeing right now. Okay, now I'll come towards the people of Peshawar, what they've been doing. I was in contact with the parents, with most of the parents. They used to come, they used to visit my office. And I've started observing that a father used to tell me that look, I'm going out to the office and I forget. And I normally I lose my way. I instead of going towards the right direction, I go towards the left. I take out my mobile and then forget which number I was about to dial. The same thing started happening. The kids, the brothers and sisters of the lost kids, they stopped going to schools. The timings of morning timings of 7 o'clock, where the kids used to get ready and the bus used to come for and the embassing time, that was very crucial for the parents, because there was no child. The bus used to come in the same time. Uh, uh, so I started observing that if a year passes like this, they'll be relegated. The whole society will get relegated, the family will get relegated, and the kids will get relegated from the society. They were going into isolation. Now, there's something important. Whenever there is some psychic case, the people with the psychological issues, you have a headache, you will go to a doctor. You have an orthopedic issue, you will go to a doctor. You have a heart issue, you will go to a doctor. But whenever you have some psychic issues, nobody would go to a doctor. He said that I am okay, the whole world is, there's a problem with the whole world, not with me. So when such like things they started coming up, Shanaz, who took part in the Alpha Bravo Charlie, I must give the credit to her. She decided to come from America and visit the families because she was a trauma therapist. She came all the way from America, and I requested the civil society by myself and asked them that I need a place where I can invite all the parents and the loved ones left behind, to come over, and we should talk to them and do something about it. And this worked. On my single call, my friends, they came up. There was a gentleman with the name Mr. Khalid Ayub. He donated his own wedding hall. And by the way, I didn't see any marriage for next 6 months. Any property transactions? No, not at all. It was all gloomy environments. They were all the people with chairs outside their houses, and just people sitting and mourning the shahadat of their loved ones. So the whole Peshawar, the whole KP was like this. But I must say the whole country was like this. Everybody who used to come, there were a number of speakers used to come and speak to the children in the school. The same thing happened in the hospitals as well, where they would visit their homes. I would visit the hospital every evening almost, to visit to the kids, would give toffees, chocolates, or whatever I could do in my own capacity, more humble capacity. I would do along with my friends. They used to come and take me along, and I would see the smile on their faces whenever they used to see us coming towards them. Uh, the we managed to gather around the parents. The wedding halls, they were at our disposal, and on our first call we could see more than 100 families coming. The the number of people who came were more than 100 families, and maybe 200 or 300 people, they came from different families. Then uh, delivered a talk, and finally what we decided, okay, what we do is we started visiting the hospitals. Head of department, head of the hospital, Lady Reading Hospital, Hayat Shahid Hospital, we have Hyderabad Hospital. We used to go there, and I met the head of departments, the head of the hospitals, and I requested them that I need voluntarily some doctors on voluntary basis. They should come and form part of us, because we cannot pay them, but I need their assistance, because they have to come and they have to meet the parents, they have to meet them, and they have to bring them back into life. It worked, and they generously allowed their doctor, and subsequently all the doctors were requested by the hospital, and they started coming in. What we what we did, that for every family we deputed a doctor, that you will go and sit with them on the same chair, on the same table, and start talking to them, and form part of the family, and just share their contacts with them. And that's how it worked. The lady doctors, the male doctors, they would mix up with the family, and they targeted each family, and they went, and it worked like this, that finally we were told that now I'm part of the family. They used to come and discuss with them, and finally, and this session, the series of session is started uh, at least twice or thrice a week, twice a week, for say about 2 3 months. We started doing that. The people started contributing. Okay, not even once I was forced to ask for any chanda. No, not at all. They were voluntarily. Nobody knew from where the money came in. Nobody knew who contributed. One gentleman would come. Okay, today dinner is from my side. Dinner mean dinner of 100, dinner of 150 people, dinner of 200 people. No electricity bills. All were paid by the gentleman who was owning the wedding hall, and the arrangements were made, and everybody would feel like as if they are sitting at home. Now, with this and environment, they came up. The people, they were they were glued to each other. With the passage of time, they used to come, and finally, after a month or so, they would smile with us as well. They would smile, they would talk to us. So that's how the role of a society came in. We managed it, we tried, and we were successful. That's what is the need of the day as well, that whenever something happens like this, the role of a society, it is always like this, to join hands, do what all they can do. The children would back to the schools, those who all were left, the parents, although we cannot expect that losing a son is such an easy thing to be forgotten. No, not at all. Losing a daughter, losing a mother. Brigadier Tariq Saeed, his wife was burnt alive. He used to sit with us. I requested him. He used to come along with his son. He would come. He would attend the event with us. There were a gentleman, a lady lost two sons. She was also there. One of the kid, he was named Gulsher. That wasn't my name. And the love for the family. There's a road in Peshawar with the name Gulsher Road in Fakirabad, Peshawar, named after that little angel. He was meant to leave at such a young age. Lot of stories. Every house has its own story, but the society society has a role to play. We all have a role to play. We all had a role to play. So the role comes after something like this happens. So there is a need of the day that we all should join hands, and with every passing day, this cohesive force should bring us together, to work as a society. In other countries, such like things are handled by the state, but for us, for an Islamic society like us, the role of the society comes at the top, then comes the state. The role of a neighbor comes first, then the role of the nation, then the role of the country, then the role of the Baitul Mal and whatever. So the role of a neighbor, the role of an uncle, the role of an auntie, it comes first. Last year I've been visiting few more families as well. The principal who was killed, who was martyred, the principal lady, her husband also died. He was a colonel, and they have a mentally challenged boy left behind in the hospital, in a rehab school. So people have challenges. Let's pay a visit. I request everybody, whenever you find time, whenever you visit a place where you know that there's a family of a shaheed, please spend few minutes with them. Please, we should be generous enough to at least have a selfie, have a picture of the house with the family and make it viral. The trend should go on, and that's how they'll feel attended. They'll feel that yes, their boy, their girl, their uncle, their father, he has done something for the nation, and the nation is never forgetting them. The nation remembers. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak on this occasion.
Thank you so much, Colonel Shah. It was indeed a tragedy, and as you rightly mentioned, that the human angle and the role of the society is very important in keeping the spirits of all those families high. Since Ms. Shumaila has to leave for a class, so I would request everybody to pose for a group photo before she leaves. So please turn on your cameras, all of you, and then we'll take a group photo, and then I'll invite the discussant, Major Chanchua.
Okay, I have a flight as well. I have to go for Lahore. I'm in Karachi right now, and I have to check out and leave for Lahore as well. I'll also beg leave after the picture.
Sure, that's why the picture at this point is important.
Thank you.
Okay, my colleague tells me it's done. Thank you so much, Ms. Shumaila. Thank you so much, Colonel Shah. If both of you have to leave, you're free to go, and we'll continue with the proceedings of the session.
Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum.
Allah Hafiz. Allah Hafiz. Okay, so now we move to the discussant of the session, Major Yasir Janjua, who is a seasoned risk and security management professional with over 30 years of experience, including military service in the field. He is occasionally invited to speak on electronic media as a defense and security analyst on regional geopolitical and threat environment. Major Janjua has qualifications from reputed universities around the world and has also taught at leading Pakistan universities as a visiting faculty member. Over to you, Major Janjua.
Thank you, Ahmad. Thank you very much. Just let me put on my airport. You can hear me properly. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can hear you, sir.
I can't hear you, probably because my AirPod is not yet connected.
We can hear you.
I don't know. Maybe just 1 second. Maybe I'd rather use my mic and not the AirPod. I think I'd use my mic and not the AirPod because somehow the AirPod maybe run out of battery somehow. Okay, sorry. Apologies for this. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
I don't know. Okay, brilliant. Okay, Ahmad, thank you very much for inviting me on this very, very important subject and in the company of the likes of Mr. Rahimullah Yousafzai and all the other learned speakers. And I'm grateful for this opportunity. I'll be very frank and very candid, and I'll not go in a textbook way in talking about the incident and the aftermath of the incident. Why? Because I have my own opinions and I have my own perceptions. So I'd like to use my freedom of expression in doing that. A lot of details have been provided by Shumaila and then Rahimullah Yousafzai Saab, and eventually Qasim Shah. Qasim Shah dealt with a different angle. So I'm not going to go into the facts of the incident, what happened, how many were killed. Before I go into any further details, without any qualms about it, indeed, this was an incident that completely jolted the entire nation. This was one incident which shook us like never before. However, as much as I, along with the rest of my countrymen, mourn the demise and the shahadat and the loss of those 147 people, including the 132 children, I am sorry to say our national response is only glorifying incidents like this and forgetting so many other incidents like this. And I blame everybody on the media also. APS attack was obviously something very, very big. But why don't we talk about Etazaz Hassan? Why don't we do a program like this about Etazaz Hassan, who was the solo person who saved the lives of many, many school children who are still those people alive today. Etazaz Hassan gave up his life. He's no longer with us, but he saves the lives of hundreds of people in Hangu. You know what I mean to say. Few weeks ago, or probably a month ago, there was an attack on a madrasa in Khyber Agency, where I think 60 or 70 children lost their lives. They're also somebody's children. Their parents must be thinking, why are our children not being talked about? Is it because the APS was inside a cantonment? I'm an ex-military officer myself. A boy from this school who lost his life was from my village in Jhelum, and the school is now named after him. The question is, this is what the enemy wanted. Enemy wanted the space in the media. This is why they wanted this to be, or something like this to happen. The whole purpose of any terrorist activity is not about killing people. It is about media, is about getting their name across, getting their agenda across, delivered to the people. And we actually somehow, unfortunately, inadvertently, helping them achieve their agenda. Does anybody of you know what happened in the Parade Lane Mosque in Rawalpindi, in which the school children were killed and they were shouting for their lives and crying, and the killers were saying, kill these children, they are children of the army officers, we want their next generations to be perished. So this, unfortunately, don't take me wrong, the terrorists have a pattern. They do this for getting the attention. They did this for getting the attention on the 16th of December 2014, because they wanted to send a message on that very day, which unfortunately 16 December 1971 remains in our history as the Black Day. And they did it on the same day to send the message. Excuse me, sorry. So what I'm trying to say is, have we as a nation learned some lessons? Unfortunately, we have not. Some of us blame the Pakistan army. We have not done enough. We have not done enough to protect the schools. How could the terrorists, with all due respect to Rahimullah Yusufzai Saab, he's a very seasoned, very senior in age and in experience and everything. It's not, I'm personally mentioning him, but the fact is, when we say the terrorists crossed 20 checkpoints and came to Army Public School in Peshawar, how could they come? Well, my dear sir, I am a risk and security management professional who has done this. I've done risk assessments around the Middle East region. There's not a 5-star hotel I have not done a risk assessment of, including the Peshawar hotel, which was bombed, and so many other places in Pakistan. So I can tell you, urban warfare is not that easy and as simple as we think. The enemy is sitting within you. The rickshaw driver who brought that bunch of terrorists was probably somebody who's still driving another rickshaw today. So how do you differentiate between the good and the bad rickshaw driver? Now, in a culture where everybody carries guns or weapons in Khyber or in Fata, how do you differentiate between the guy who's carrying a gun and he is not the terrorist and he's a terrorist? So urban warfare is not that simple and is not that easy. And especially once they entered, I've been hearing this for the last 6 years. This is not the first time. People say, oh, somebody says army came after 8 minutes. Somebody says the quick response came after 15 minutes. Somebody says why it took them 8 hours to clear the school. These people who say these things, they have never fought a war. I have fought. I can tell you this thing. Urban warfare is the most difficult form, especially when the terrorists have entered a school. How can you risk the lives of hundreds of others by just doing this to kill the terrorists and in trying to kill the terrorists? So these are the complexities, and we have to learn the lessons and understand that criticism is always not that great. You don't undermine the work of your own armed forces by saying these things. These are very complex situations. So I'm not speaking out of the script, so you might find my observations and my comments up and down. I might touch upon one subject because I've just jotted down some comments and I'm coming. So what I'm trying to say is, if it was the 16th of December, then have we learned some lessons from 1971 as a nation? Don't just blame the armed forces. Similarly, on the 2014 16th of December, this happened in the APS. It could have happened in any public school in Peshawar city as well, or in any non-garrison, non-cantonment school as well. The impact would have been the same. However, they chose that because I have people in my address book who I know very closely who were there. Nobody mentions about them because obviously the regional head of the schools for APS that day was a mother of one of my friends, a retired lieutenant colonel, a friend of mine. His mother was the regional head of the APS schools. She was inside, and for 8 hours he was trying to get her, although luckily, alhamdulillah, she's alive today, because she and some other teachers hid themselves in a toilet and they were spared their lives, but after many hours. What I'm trying to say here is, we must learn the lessons and move forward. We as a nation have not learned the lesson to live our lives. There needs to be a paradigm shift the way we carry on our lives. Even today, this is important. The APS, why did this APS attack happen? And why, unfortunately, some of these things are happening even in lesser number, but still happening today, is because we as a nation, we should not leave just the management of our security to the armed forces. We have to change our lives. We have to know who is my next door neighbor who's just moved into my next door house on a rent. Who is he? Has he got himself cleared? And what if suspicious vehicles come and park in front of the house every day? If we find that activity happening next door to our house, we must report it. We must report any suspicion. We don't do that. Anybody can get up and become a taxi driver in Pakistan today because there is no licensing authority to regulate this process. And that is why we find the GHQ attack or this attack or something like this what happened, whereby people were renting places and they were using rental cars. They were driving into the city and they were carrying out these attacks, and we couldn't stop them. So if there is a mechanism to regulate or find out who these people are, we can do this job. And doing this job is not just the responsibility of Pakistan Army. There are other institutions like Excise and Taxation Office has to register vehicles. There should be one organization or the regulatory body which should regulate the licensing of taxi drivers. There should be a regulatory body which should regulate the renting of houses like we have in the UAE, RERA, Real Estate Regulatory Authority. Anybody who wants to rent a house has to go to RERA and get itself registered. So, I mean, these are the kind of things we as a nation have to do. Instead of mourning every year on the 16th of December, we must be proactive and do things the way they need to be done. And unfortunately, it's just not the APS martyrs. It's the martyrs, as I said, in the madrasa that happened last month or 2 months ago. It's the martyrs in the parade lane. It's the martyrs in Karachi. Those people from, I think, the Ismaili community who were martyred in the bus. So all those people, we must, yes, obviously these small children, these are flowers. I have children, so I feel the pain of those parents. But what I'm saying is, as a nation, if we want to stop these incidents from happening again, we as a nation have to stand up and become more proactive security-wise. We need to do things and not just leave them to the Pakistan Army. Because no matter what army does, it cannot be there at every school in every city of the country. So somebody will have to do their job well. Does that happen? Are the schools doing their job? Are we really there? The parents do not cooperate with the schools management. Even if the schools are trying to do, the parents do not cooperate. We do this on a daily basis. We see this on a daily basis. So there needs to be a paradigm shift in the way we live our lives. I will unfortunately not sit here, unfortunately not sit here and talk about this APS tragedy to glorify or to mourn those. I will want that what we have learned from that tragedy, that we should not let something like this happen. Yes, there was a national action plan. Yes, there was a moratorium on the capital punishment that was overturned. But me and you as individuals, I hope this message is going to a wider audience, not just the participants of this seminar or this webinar, that we need to change our lives. This is the only way we will prevent another APS attack. Unfortunately, we have left all these things to just the Pakistan Army, which has a great and a humongous task. It has a task to manage the western border. It has a task to manage the eastern border. It has a task to manage Siachen. It has a task to manage Balochistan. And then we are also tasked to manage the internal security. Why shouldn't the police be trained and capable to do what it's supposed to do? This is the primary responsibility of the police, of the paramilitary forces. So what I'm trying to say here is, we can all sit here and talk about, the mourning part of it. Yes, I agree. But if we have to learn some lessons, and in places like Institute of Regional Studies, if there has to be a discourse and a dialogue on such issues, we should talk about concrete measures. As I said, I am a security and risk management professional with certifications from all around the world. I can tell you, we are poorly prepared as a nation, as institutions, as schools, as individuals. I'll ask you a question, Ahmad, very straight away. This is what I teach people globally. In our country, there is no education on such issues. I'll just ask you one example. Do you have a fire extinguisher in your kitchen? I know your answer. The answer will be no. Because we as a nation do not prepare for such eventualities. You go in the West, you will find a fire extinguisher in every house. So if there is a fire in the kitchen, the family has some equipment to catch that, to light out that fire, and they are trained on that. We don't even have fire extinguishers in our houses, leave alone being trained. Our lady wives are not even trained. Forget about having fire extinguishers. These are the kind of things people do. As I said, do you know who's your next door neighbor? What is his occupation? What does he do? Where does he go in the morning and comes back? This is the kind of things we need to know. About the taxi drivers and rickshaw drivers, I said the government needs to regulate. I've been saying this on some forums, but obviously, maybe people have their own limitations. Now, in year 2018, 19, and 20, maybe things are changing a little bit with these Kareems and Ubers coming in. Maybe some form of regulation is coming, but still private taxi drivers and private rickshaw drivers are still plying on the roads. These are the kind of steps we need to take. We can talk about these morning meetings every year, but that will not stop another APS attack if we do not change. And security is everybody's responsibility. It's not just the armed forces. So my message, and I will end this conversation here on this point, that my message to everybody on this group, everybody in this webinar, and to this society is, the enemy wants to use this and such events to gain or get time on our electronic media and on our print media. That is their aim, to get appearance, to get noticed. We are providing them the fodder by doing that. We mourn the loss, but we must not glorify the loss, unfortunately. And we must prepare ourselves for tomorrow, which I am sorry to say, we are not prepared. Posting a guard on the school gate is not just enough. There are many more things. The private schools, the government, they need to do certain things. In some cases, some work has been done. I'm not saying we are just at the same point as we were in 2014. The work has been done. But there needs to be more work to be done. People need to be educated on what needs to be done on their security. The children need to be educated. We need to educate our children to be aware of their surroundings. We have seen in the last 3-4 years, there have been cases of abductions, young girls being abducted and raped and killed, young boys being abducted and raped and killed. Why don't we have seminars and education sessions, training sessions in schools where we tell the children they should not go out alone, and even if they are going out alone, they should not talk to strangers. These are the kind of things we need to do so that APSs do not happen. So I humbly say, my opinions are very straightforward and sometimes are very unorthodox, but I am what I am. My love for the country and my love for the armed forces, my love for the people of Pakistan will not change. However, we need to find ways to educate ourselves so that we move into tomorrow and APS does not happen. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Major Janjua. I think when you talked about the terrorists wanting media attention and grabbing media attention through such terrorist attacks, Walter LeCour, who is an expert on terrorism long ago, he defined one of his comments about terrorism was that it's a propaganda by deed. So they take an action and they grab media attention, and that's what they want. As you rightly pointed out, that alongside highlighting the losses to terrorism, we also need to highlight more our bravery in the face of terrorism. Examples like Ehtizaz Hassan and many more that you mentioned. And also we at the Raimullah Saab talked about the macro level responses such as border fencing and the mainstreaming of FATA. But as you also pointed out, we also need regulation at the micro level and regulation as well as education of the citizens in that. Since President IRS, Ambassador Nadeem Riaz is also with us, and he would also like to thank all the panelists and give his remarks before we go to the Q&A session. Over to you, Ambassador Riaz.
Thank you very much, Arish. I would like to first of all thank all the participants and especially all the speakers for talking about the APS tragedy. People spoke at length. Uh, they spoke about the heroics of people. And then we also went over a lot of ground of what should be done in the future. There's no doubt that it is a very sad day today. I still remember the day APS happened. I was in Islamabad. Uh, it was extremely tragic. It was extremely sad. We had to brief a lot of people. We had to talk to a lot of people. We had to talk to a lot of foreign governments. But the basic thing is that what happened that day will always be remembered. People lost their children, people lost their loved ones. And when we think about it, I still get tears in my eyes because what happened was absolutely unpardonable. Yes, there were lapses, and there was very well prepared terrorists. There were incidences of bravery. But from that day, there was a resolve in the nation that we have to get rid of this menace of terrorism. And we did, but at a very high cost. Nations learn from experiences, and at times, those experiences make us wiser. Wise people are those which learn for much better to ensure that such incidences do not take place. I completely agree that we should be prepared. I completely agree that security is not the responsibility of one organization, of the intelligence agencies. In today's world, in today's times, it is the responsibility of all of us. We need to know who is our neighbor because we have heard from our parents and grandparents that in the olden days, everybody used to know who used to live in the village. Everybody would know who would live in a particular part of the city. There was a system in place. And I completely agree that we have to go back to a particular system of vigilance because it is a collective responsibility which we all owe, not to ourselves, not only to our children, but to the entire nation. But we have to also be wary of our enemies. We need also to know what the enemy is aiming at and targeting at. The basic thing is we need to be united. Because I think when you are united, then your power to tackle adversity increases manifolds. If there is a message which I want to give from the IRS forum, it is that we as a nation should be united. We should sink our differences for the greater cause of projecting, of promoting, and of increasing the outreach of our motherland. Because our identity is Pakistan and it will always be Pakistan. So, condolences to all the people who have lost their lives and their dear ones in all incidences of terrorism, which unfortunately have been a part of our society for the last many years. And let's resolve that we will do what is required from us to ensure that such incidences do not happen in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, President IRS, for these remarks. Now we move on to the Q&A session. If anyone wants to ask the question verbally, there is a raise hand option in the participants panel in the lowest right corner of your screens. Some of the participants have already typed their questions in. Both of the questions are, I think, addressed to Rahimullah Saab. But I think I would, before I allow Rahimullah Saab to answer those questions in the chat panel, I also have a couple of questions for you, sir. You mentioned the mainstreaming of FATA as a response to the APS terrorist attack. What we saw that the 25th constitutional amendment did away with the existing institutional structures that were in place for FATA at the time, and kind of created a vacuum for some time. And even today, when we look at the administrative institutional structures in FATA, especially with regard to security and justice provision, they are not adequately in place. And we still are a long way from having, as you mentioned, the same legal system that we have in other parts of the country. So I would like to have your views on where do we stand on mainstreaming of FATA. Secondly, sir, you also talked about the killing of Omar Narey and Fazlullah in drone strikes in Afghanistan. You mentioned that Pakistan pressurized the US to conduct drone attacks against those militants that were holed up in Nangarhar and Kunad in Afghanistan. With the peace process there, and now one of the components of the peace process is that foreign forces will have to leave the country. And the Taliban might have full power in Afghanistan or sharing of power with the Afghan government. So how do you see that affecting the security situation inside Pakistan? Thank you, sir.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Harish,
Yes,
you have asked two very important questions requiring long answers. I don't think we have enough time for that. But let me tell you that the mainstreaming of FATA was done without any proper homework. The previous government actually, released the findings or the recommendations of the FATA Reforms Committee headed by Sartaj Aziz and announced the merger 1 week before the end of the term of that government. So there was opposition initially by two of their allies, Maulana Fazlur Rahman and Mahmood Khan Achakzai. And Nawaz Sharif could not decide in time. And that's why there was no proper homework. And now we are facing the problems. There are teething problems. And, this government is in a hurry, I must say. But, most of the time now of the provincial government is taken up by trying to expedite the reforms in the former FATA. As we said, there were three issues which took up most of their time: the BRT in Peshawar, the BTT. You will be surprised. What is BTT? Billion Tree Tsunami. That took most of the time. It is being criticized or being praised. And then thirdly, we had the FATA reforms. So I will say the mainstreaming is slow. There's a lack of experience among the people who are ruling the province. The political agents, are now almost powerless. Again, Yasir Janjua will be maybe critical of me when I talk about the army, but the army is in control, as we all know, since the deployment, because of very valid reasons to fight terrorists. It is still there, and it will remain, I think, until, as the army says, until the end of next year. So the other officials, civil, and they feel that they have no power and no authority, and the political agent is now sharing power with the MNAs, the MPAs, in a way the judges, the army, everybody. So we have this hybrid system, which may not be able to deliver the way we want. So I think, yes, security issues are still there, especially in North Waziristan. Lack of resources is a problem, and Arish, most importantly, capacity issues. Capacity issues. How do these line departments spend this kind of money, 124 billion a year, for development and reconstruction, if they could not spend 24 billion rupees a year earlier? I remember the most they could spend was 10 billion rupees out of 24. So now they have to spend 124 billion, and they need capacity of all these line departments. I think the second question is regarding Afghanistan, the peace process, and we have these terrorists based in Afghanistan. The Afghan government sometimes say they have no control. Sometimes they say, that they were denying their presence. Sometimes they say they have taken action. We have different answers, vague answers, lack of will. It's a tit for tat. Arish, you know that. Tit for tat. They say you are hosting, harboring Afghan Taliban and Haqqani network. And they think that by hosting Pakistani militants, they are taking, their revenge. And they are using them. And we all know RAW and NDS are involved in all this. So that's why we have a very, significant interest to play the role of a peacemaker, to bring peace to Afghanistan, even though Afghan government does not want us to play a very visible role and take credit for that. India also. So I think we have to pursue that. We should not be interfering, but we should be facilitating the peace process. I think, the fact that Fazlullah and this guy, Umar Nare, were killed, and so many others, Commander Sajna, all of them were killed in Afghanistan. And that was an evidence that they are based there, although Ashraf Ghani and Hamid Karzai were denying it earlier. But we have the proper evidence. That's why Pakistan government went ahead and made this dossier, which is, I think, a very good initiative, and we have to publicize that and even collect more evidence. We have Kulbhushan Yadav, we have, in our custody. So we need to use that evidence, to put pressure on Afghanistan and also on India. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have a few questions in the chat panel as well that I would seek your attention toward. The first question is from my colleague, Ms. Mariam Mastoor, whose question, Raimullah Saab, is to you. Which, in your opinion, was the biggest loophole in our security structure that led to this incident? We are talking about the December 16, 2014 APS attack.
I think Mariam and Arish, I had talked about it. I said, and again, that was maybe Mr. Janju had reservations. I said there were 20 security checkpoints, not only of the army and the frontier corps, but also the Hasadars, the levies, and the police in Peshawar. But it cannot happen without facilitators. We all know that. That's why the 6 people, were arrested. They were facilitators. I said There was a rickshaw driver, clerk from a government department, and the Pesh Imam. And they were hosted, they were fed, they were brought to the place for the attack, you know. So I think, yes, I know this is urban terrorism. People can find support, they can pay people, they can do all these kind of things. And this is why there are so many attacks in Pakistan. But you know, everybody has a responsibility. So if these checkpoints allow smuggling, which is happening in Pakistan, you know, I don't know, because they may not have realized that these 6 people traveling together or separately, they could be terrorists. And then they spent a night, and then they came in a vehicle, and you know, the walls of this school were not very high. They came from the backside, they brought a ladder. The ladder was used to climb the wall, and then, you know, they launched the attack, and they went straight to the auditorium because they knew there was an event there, and they could get as many students as possible and try to harm them. So, you know, these are facts. And if I say, some people say 8 minutes or 15 minutes, or it took 8 hours, I am trying to present the facts which were given to us by the army. I attended so many briefings by the corps commander at that time, Lieutenant General Hidayatur Rahman, the first general ever from Gilgit-Baltistan. You know, and one of the reasons he gave us why there was no patrolling in that area that day was that they needed soldiers, manpowers, to go to North Waziristan to participate in Zarb-e-Azab operations. And they were trying to take away as many soldiers as possible from every cantonment to deploy them in North Waziristan. And that's why they say there was no patrolling that day outside the army public school. So these are the reasons which were given, and I'm not saying it from my side, and we are friends, we are Pakistanis, we are here, you know, we are not trying to give any enemy an opportunity to criticize us, but we are trying to present facts given to us officially and then try to learn lessons from all that. So we are doing it in good faith. And, you know, so the security lapses, Mariam, I have already highlighted. I will not try to waste your time by repeating it. Maybe you have got my recording. If not, I can send it to you.
Sir, then there is Nabila's very long question. I will summarize it for you. Her question basically is that why did it take an attack like APS to wake up our national conscience and come up with policy consensus policy instruments like the National Action Plan? Why didn't we wake up with several other terrorist attacks that took place before that? That's basically a question.
Nabila, if you recall again my presentation, I lamented the fact that it took us 11 years to come up with the National Action Plan. The military operations began in 2003, if you recall, in South Waziristan, you know, and if you remember Musharraf saying, we have a high value target in that Kalusha area near Wana. And that was the first military operation in which, unfortunately, our army suffered heavy casualties because the convoy was moving on the road. The convoys, as you know, they have to move slowly, and they were trying to go there. And then on the way, on the road, they were attacked a number of times. And this high value target, who was that? You know, it was the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan leader, Tahir Yuldashev, who escaped from that, you know, Mahasra, that siege. And, you know, he lived another day, and then he launched so many attacks. Finally, people in South Waziristan, the Wazir, Ahmadzai Wazir tribe, fought these Uzbeks and expelled them with the help of the Pakistan army. So what I'm saying is that, you know, my reasoning is that there were so many big attacks before that, you know, and GHQ and ISI office in Peshawar, and, Kamra and Karachi and, Mehran base, I think in Karachi, the naval base. So many attacks had taken place before. In Multan also, I think ISI office was attacked. But, the GHQ was the biggest attack, I believe. But there was no, I don't know. I was, again, I'm as surprised as you. Why couldn't we come up with a proper plan, a comprehensive plan to fight terrorism, extremism, and militancy? Why it took us so long? Why should the APS have happened to wake us up? We did wake up after the APS, but it was too late. So I think that that's why we say we have to learn our lessons. Now, if there's a challenge, if there's an issue, we have to be awake. We have to take action, before it is too late.
Okay, I can see my colleague Imran Sardar's hand raised electronically. I will now invite him to ask his question, and that would be the last question of the session, as we are overshooting the time.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is with Rahimullah Yusuf Saeed. There are multiple angles through which we can trace out the factors that led to the failure, like it's a security lapse that led to that tragedy. But root causes have not been clearly identified yet, so that we can invest in the right direction. There is a psyche factor that played a role, as Colonel Shah said. There is grievances factor. There is hatred against Pakistan Army and the government that shook the nation. And moreover, there are the gray areas in Pakistan-Afghanistan relation that also played a role. So we can improve the security infrastructure, but what concrete proposal we have at the state level to address these intangible factors that bring us to the unpleasant and sometimes terrible situation like APS time and again? Thank you.
I think, Imran, you asked a very pertinent question. Maybe I will request the IRS to arrange another event to address all these questions, because we were specifically talking today about the APS tragedy. But let me say that I didn't mention, and maybe it should have been mentioned, the past Pakistani policies, which in a way created, these militants, and, we are being accused of using them for achieving our foreign policy goals. I don't know, we may not fully agree with it, but past policies and these people, allowing an armed group to operate. Now, after the fatwa, we say no armed group can operate and exist in Pakistan and then fight the Pakistani state. But these decisions, these are basic decisions. Why should we allow any armed group? Why should we train people, in the use of weapons? And maybe then, why couldn't we stop Maulana Sufi Muhammad from crossing the border with about 10,000 people to fight the Americans on behalf of Taliban in Afghanistan? Why? It was so strange. People just announcing publicly crossing the border from Dir and Bajawal, entering Afghanistan, and then many of them getting killed and captured. Even now, some people are missing. So, these kind of decisions should have been taken. Then you mentioned the relations with Afghanistan. It has been a very unfriendly relation. Afghanistan was the only country in the world which opposed Pakistan membership in the UN when we became independent. That was the first, act of animosity, and Afghanistan took the lead. We did not respond, I must say, until 1973. They were harboring anti-Pakistan elements, and we were not reacting. We tried to befriend them. But then we also started reacting when it became too much, and then we started hosting and harboring Afghan government's opponents. And, Hikmat Yar and Ahmad Shah Massoud and Rabbani, all of them came to Pakistan, and we trained them and hosted them. And then after the communist revolution, then in a way we were doing it not so secretly, supporting the Afghan Mujahideen and then Taliban. So that is also a factor. Afghanistan has been interfering and we have been responding, reacting, whatever you can call it. Now India again, so I know that, you talked about tangible reasons, why it is so, why we could not take action or take steps in time. So I think this is a very important topic. I have been talking about it. I talked at the army institutions and the civil institutions, the name Islamabad, name Karachi, Lahore, Peshawar. So I think we can discuss these issues because I know you have raised very important questions.
Thank you so much, Rahimullah Saab. Some of my colleagues and other participants have other comments and questions, but since we have already overshot our time by at least half an hour, I would now wrap up the discussion. I think when we talk of policing, I think that there are two approaches to it, two approaches to viewing law enforcement. I think it is wrong to assume that policing and law enforcement is about preventing crime. It's not about as much about preventing crime as it is about deterring crime. So when a crime actually, like there cannot be a policeman in every nook and corner of the country to stop people from committing crimes. But what the law enforcement system does is that whenever a crime is committed, that crime is punished. And when that crime is punished, other criminals get a message from it, and it works as a deterrent. And in this case, as we can see that all 6 terrorists were killed by the security forces. 6 of their accomplices were captured. 5 of them, as Rahimullah Saab shared, were hanged to death. And then some of their bosses sitting in Afghanistan, Pakistan government also put pressure on the Afghan government and the US government, and they were brought to justice. So I think that is how law enforcement generally responds to such threats, and that is how the government of Pakistan also responded to it. And besides these hard actions against all these threats, there was also on the sidelines, there was another counter-terrorism approach that was undertaken as a response to this, which, as Rahimullah Saab also pointed out, that mainstreaming, fencing of the border with Afghanistan, which was pointed out as a lapse by the Judicial Commission report. The fencing started, mainstreaming of FATA was prioritized, even though it was done without much homework, and we still have, there are problems with its implementation, but still there a need was felt and an action was taken. And alongside that, as Rahimullah Saab, once again, he mentioned the Paigam-e-Pakistan, which brought together all the religious scholars from various sects, and they issued a fatwa against terrorism, which is quite unprecedented, and which I think the government deserves appreciation for. Rahimullah Saab, if you don't want to make any concluding remarks, I'll wrap it up here. Do you want to say anything?
I think we're already, running out of time. So I think, you make your concluding remarks, but I'm happy to be speaking at a place where I used to work. That's an honor for me.
It's always a pleasure having you, Rahimullah Saab. You've always been very kind to us whenever we have invited you to speak at our events. You've always been very welcoming. Thank you to you. Thank you to Major Janjua. Thank you to all the other participants and panelists. With that, I will wrap up the discussion. Thank you, everybody. Allah Hafiz.